Welcome to another edition to Comic Flashback. I'm All the Cross 316, and we are looking at Daredevil issue number 6. This issue came out in February of 1965, and today we are looking at a brand new team of villains here. They are called the Fellowship of Fear, and they make their first appearance in this issue. So we have an exciting issue to look at today. And so let's go ahead and get started with today's story. But before we get started, go ahead and give this video a like and comment down below what you think about this team, the Fellowship of Fear. We're going to be looking at the very first appearance of Mr. Fear, as well as we're looking at the other members of the team, which is the Ox and Ill. Now, Ox and Ill, this is not their first appearance. Ox made his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man issue 14, and the Ill made his first appearance in Strange Tales issue 112. So I just wanted to clarify on all that. As always, this issue is brought to you by Stan D-Man Lee, who wrote this issue. We have illustrations by Wally Wood and the lettering page by Sam Rosen. So let's go ahead and start today's issue off. We have the beginning of this issue with the film crew here. They are in town and they're filming a movie, and we have Daredevil up on the rooftop, and he's pretty much listening in on what's going on. But what we find out at the get-go is that the film crew believes that they are using these actors who appear to look like the Ox and the Ill, but in actuality, this is the genuine Ox and Ill. Both men are in cahoots right now, and they are planning to commit a big crime here. And their ringleader is basically this guy right here, which is Mr. Fear. We'll look at him just in a couple of seconds. So we see right from the get-go that Daredevil seems to think that something is amiss here. So he leaps below, and he's going to tackle these two villains. And so right off the bat, we have some great action scenes right here. We have Ox and the Ill tackling Daredevil here. Now, Daredevil, he can put up a pretty good fight, as we've seen in the last 5 issues. He's able to fight on his own. But what we find here is that it appears that maybe 3 villains against one superhero might be too much. And so we see here, once again, that Daredevil is going to be putting up a big fight, and we see that the film crew is going to be filming this entire scene here. And here we go, we see that Mr. Fear makes his appearance here, and he has a pistol here. And this pistol is unique in that when it's fired, there are fear pellets. And so that's one thing he's known for. So there's these fumes that come off of the pellets. And all of a sudden we see that Daredevil just loses his mind. He becomes fearful, and he escapes here, and he just runs away. He's pretty much terrified of, being attacked here. And so we see here that Daredevil is viewed as a coward here, as he left the scene of action here. And so we have the cops here, and the film crew explains the entire thing. And the next day, we have Karen Page and basically Nelson, Foggy Nelson here, who is Matt Murdock's partner, attorneys at law. And they're explaining the whole thing to Matt Murdock, like, man, it does not look good for Daredevil. He looks like he's been a coward. So now let's look at the origin of Mr. Fear. How did he become Mr. Fear? Well, we come to find out that he used to be a sculptor, and a pretty good one at that. As we could see here, he's made sculptures of villains and superheroes, and his name is Zoltan Drago. Zoltan Drago, from this entire time, he's wanting to make these lifelike sculptures and then find some way to cause these sculptures to come to life. And so one day when he's experimenting, he's in his little laboratory, and he has his little cat here. He tells the cat to get away, but the cat knocks off a beaker, and the beaker falls into a bunch of fumes here, and it causes, for a moment here, Drago here to become fearful. And then all of a sudden he understands that maybe I could use this to my advantage. And so what he does now is he forms his own little pistol. He uses the gas, and so now he is going to join as this big Mr. Fear character here. So he makes his own costume, and so he's like, all right, I have my costume, I have my fear pellets. Who should I recruit? So he looks throughout all of his little statues here, and he thinks, well, you know what? The ox and ill, they would make a great recruitments here. So that's exactly what he does. He recruits the ill and the ox here. And so now we come back to the present, and we see here that Mr. Fear is going to use this statue of Daredevil to their advantage. So the next day, we see here that we see Nelson and Murdoch are good at work, and we also see, as we've seen in the last couple of issues, that Karen Page definitely has a crush for Matt Murdock. But we also know, for example, last issue, or may have been the issue before, that Foggy Nelson proposed to Karen Page. And so this is the main reason why Matt Murdock is not showing his feelings towards Karen Page. So they hear about this museum here that has all these famous statues of superheroes. So they, you know, call it quits for the day, and they go visit this museum. And while they're at this museum here, all of a sudden we see that Foggy Nelson thinks he saw the ox, and so this is going to cause Foggy Nelson to come back later that night to investigate. And we also know that Matt Murdock had smelled some of that hair tonic that's on the ox, as well as knowing and pretty much detecting an odor which comes from Mr. Fear. And so we see here that Daredevil is going to visit the museum later that night, as well as Foggy Nelson. And while he is creeping in through that window, we're going to see another attack by the Ox and Eel here. So Daredevil is going to be tackling these guys. We see that we see Foggy Nelson arrive on the scene, and Mr. Fear is about to tackle him. He shoots Daredevil once again with that fear pellet, distracting him. And then we see that Foggy Nelson rips apart a part of Mr. Fear's costume here. Mr. Fear calls for the Ox to take down Foggy Nelson here. He pounces on him, and Foggy Nelson is out for the count, and we see that all three villains escape. So now we see that Daredevil is, in drastic circumstances, is going to alert the police. The police get Foggy Nelson to the hospital. They call Karen Page. She arrives on the scene, and we see here that Matt Murdock cannot explain himself, but he has to leave because he has to protect Foggy Nelson, his friend. And so this entire time we see that Karen Page is like, why are you so unemotional all the time? If only you would show some emotion, I would show you my love. And so we have that going on here. So we see that Daredevil is outside looking through the window, and he sees three men approach Karen Page, and he notices right off the bat that these are the three villains here. And so they're going to basically try to silence Foggy Nelson, and all of a sudden we see Daredevil crash through the window, and he's going to tackle these three villains once again. So once again, now we have a scene right in the hospital room. Daredevil pretty much switches the light switch here, and now they're fighting in the dark, so Daredevil is at his advantage. Mr. Fear knows that they are at a disadvantage here, so he tells them that he needs to go. And so now we see that Foggy Nelson has been saved here. And so now we see here that Mr. Fear is going to return back to his museum, but upon returning, he doesn't know that Daredevil is there acting as a statue. So now this is going to be the final confrontation here. Daredevil tackles these men here. He basically uses this air vent to cause the reverse of the fear pellet here. causing both the Eel and Ox to retreat. And we see once again some great action scenes by Daredevil and just fighting these guys. And so the battle continues here, and we see that Daredevil plays possum. He pretty much uses that to his advantage and takes down the Ox, takes down the Eel, and Mr. Fear is going to be the last person to tackle here. And we see once again that the Ox is not out for the count, but then, boom, timber! He falls down. So throughout that entire big fight, all three men could not stop Daredevil. And so Daredevil was successful in that big fight. And so he now alerts the police. So these three men will go to jail, to prison. And so that'll be the end for now for this big team that we just were introduced. Maybe they'll make another appearance in future issues. We're not too sure. But for now, we know that they are going to prison. So now we see that Matt Murdock returns to the hospital to check up on Foggy Nelson. And it looks like Foggy Nelson is recovering rapidly, and he'll be back to normal soon. And so that's how we end this issue. And I hope you liked it. And until next time, keep reading comics.